Hello beautiful people, and welcome to another video brought to you by yours truly. Today is the 28th of May, Thursday 2020, and today's video will be titled The Characteristics of the Spirit. So we've all heard them people out there, I'm very spiritual, and with that old word called the Spirit. Cream soda again. Ben Shaw's cream soda. Since 1871, it's good. Yeah, that old word called the Spirit that everyone has heard, and so many religious groups and orders talk about, but none of them really tell you what the characteristics of the Spirit are, and few tell you the difference between the Spirit and the soul. So I'm going to give you a few characteristics of the Spirit and what it is. So the Spirit in human beings resides in the waters of human beings. It dominantly resides in the central nervous system, down the spine, the brain, and in the blood of human beings. That's why when people do meditation, they feel the Kundalini going up the spine. They can feel some kind of movement in the spine. That's the Spirit. So the Spirit resides in human beings in the blood, the central nervous system, and the brain. The mind and the spirit are the same thing. So when someone says, "Oh, I'm mind, spirit, body, and soul," they're talking a bit foolishly, because the spirit and the mind are the same thing. The Spirit is both male and female. If you were going to extract the spirit of a plant, then when a plant's dying and in fermentation, you can extract the alcohol content from the waters, and that is the spirit of a plant. That's why they call the top shelf in bars, they call it spirits, because it's the spirit of a plant. And the spirit can be extracted from any living thing. So what happens when you drink the spirit of a plant? Well, it mixes with your own spirit. You mix the spirit of a plant with your own spirit, and it makes you drunk. Some people who get drunk on plant spirits become misbehaved. Others find hideously looking people more seductive. So the spirit, when we die, the spirit does leave the body. It's like a gas, and it takes 3 days for it to leave the body, for it to evaporate. If you leave the lid off of a bottle of whiskey, what happens to the spirit content? What happens to the alcohol content of that whiskey? It evaporates, no? That's the same as what happens when we die. It's like taking the bottle off of the bottle lid off of a bottle of whiskey. So when we die, the spirit evaporates, and it takes 3 days. If you want to test this feature in nature, then just break off the branch of a living tree or plant, and after a few days it will become dry and crunchy, regardless of the environment, regardless of if the environment is humid or not. That plant matter taken off from a tree or a plant, a bush, will turn brown and crunchy, because the spirit will begin instantly evaporating from it. The Tibetans used to leave their dead, the Tibetans leave their dead still in situ for 72 hours. They give their dead 3 days, and that's for the spirit to evaporate. So this is also Jesus rose from the dead after 3 days. So there are numerous texts out there that provide confirmation on the workings of the spirit. As far as I'm aware, the spirit is earthbound. It doesn't go off into the airy-fairy dimensions or back to the well of all souls. That's something else we'll have to talk about, is the characteristics of the soul. But as I said, the spirit is both male and female, and kind of explains why we have people that are gays, lesbians, etc. But we will come on to that in more detail. This video I just want to give some characteristics for the spirit itself. So the spirit does leave the body when the body dies, and it takes 3 days for it to leave. Where does the spirit go? It remains earthbound as far as I'm aware, and probably moves into another living organism. I'd say that's why Native American Indians would name their children after specific animals, knowing that the spirit that had gone into the child was in a specific animal before, or a specific plant, or a specific bird. We also carry what is known as the family spirit. So in our spirit we have the genetics of our forefathers, and that's carried through and mixed with the spirit when we're made in the womb. So when people talk about mental illness, there's nothing that psychiatrists or psychologists can do. There's no doctor that's going to be able to help most people, and you find that anyway. Most people that are suffering mental health issues, they're given these drugs and doped and dosed, but it never really helps them. They always end up going back to the hospital, and that's because mental illness isn't it isn't a physical, scientific illness that can be healed with the drugs of a doctor. It's a spiritual illness. So people with schizophrenia, other personality disorders, like major personality disorders, they're dealing with a spiritual issue, possession, etc. And in the old days they knew this, and that's why evil spirits, demonic spirits, were exorcised from people much of the time. And still, that practice still goes on today in some of the older tribal communities. Well, that's what it is. It's just, because it's the mind, it's a spiritual illness and a spiritual matter, not a physical illness or a physical matter. And no amount of drugs are going to help somebody, because once a spirit's inside someone, a foreign spirit's inside someone, it's there until it's taken out. And you ain't going to take that out with large doses of suppressing drugs. So we have a physical body, a spirit and a soul, and if we didn't have a spirit, we wouldn't be fluid-like. We wouldn't be able to move fluidly. We would be heaps of salt probably on the ground, with just the soul in that salt as an observer. So the spirit allows us to move around. It allows us to be fluid in our movements, and that's the purpose for it. People get it mixed up a lot with the soul. Now, when we look at the world, we can see that the majority of people have been mentally mentally programmed. The majority of people have been mentally programmed because they've been watching TV. They've been given news and TV programs to program their spirits, their minds. So the problem that we have here is, obviously, once people give up their minds, their spirits, then there's no defense left for the soul. And that'll be next. That'll be the next thing, because that's ideally the evil of this world's main plan, is to capture the soul. And in another video I'll tell you why the soul is so important and what it represents. So what we're in now is we're surrounded by a world of people, you know, they refer to as sheeple or zombies, people that believe the dribble that they're fed, and by doing so their minds are poisoned. Look at the hyper sexualized people in society now, you know. Look at the hypersexualized people. Look at them. That's called poisoning the spirit. Look at all the people that are addicted to different drugs, different, even, you know, foods. People that are addicted to alcohol. That's poison for the spirit. Because the spirit is the mind. It's the last defense. It's the last defense that human beings have to protect the real precious stuff, which is the soul. So people need to, probably best people wake up. Probably best people realise how badly they've been soiling their spirits, because the next thing that's going to be soiled and taken from them is their souls. And that's something that nobody wants to lose. That's the purpose of life. That's the reason why we're here. The spirit just gives us animation, but the soul is the purpose for that. Is the life, the purpose of life, the observer. I'll give you the characteristics of the soul in another video. But we are in a spiritual war, and I've said it before. This is a spiritual war, and I'm not the only one that says it. We don't go out to fight the enemy that's running rife in this world. To fight that enemy, we don't go out there with sticks and guns and cause chaos. That's what it wants us to do. The more people do that, fighting this war, the more they're giving the enemy the chance to lock them up and get even more heavy-handed. So we can't fight that way. This is a spiritual war, and when I say a spiritual war, it's a war for your minds. It's your mind. You need to take back control of your mind. What can the enemy do if you've taken back the control of your mind? What can the enemy do if you turn around and just say, no, I'm not accepting that? If people say no, they're not accepting it en masse, then there's nothing that the enemy can do. Absolutely nothing. Spiritual war. Everybody's fear. Their minds are fearful. Their spirits are scared. Really scared. Stop the fear. There's nothing to fear. Once you know what the real deal behind this joke they call life, behind this physical fairy ground, behind this amusement park of the physical world, and then there's nothing to fear. Fear what? So they're breaking down your spirits, your minds, and they've been doing it for years and years and years, to you, to your mother, to your father, to your mother and father's mother's father, etc, etc, etc. And they're still doing it now, and their little plan, evil's little plan, to get everybody traced and tracked and surveyed, everybody watched From Birth to Death is just around the corner. And it's going to be up to your spirit, your minds, to say no to that bull crap. It's not going to be down to you getting into the streets with guns. Now, you know, if somebody lays a hand on you, then you have every right to snap that hand off. If somebody physically touches you, you have the right to defend yourself. Absolutely, you do. But in the grand scheme of things, this is a spiritual war. And so if you want to win this spiritual war, you better start cleaning that spirit of yours. And that means get off the drugs, drink plenty of water, maybe look to some religious texts for assistance, because it's all in there. So remember, the spirit gives you animation. The spirit and the mind are the same thing. The spirit is both male and female. And I'll explain that male and female side of the brain more in of the mind, brain, spirit. I'll explain that in more detail in the coming videos for sure. Because I mean, obviously, it's a big subject. I'm not just going to get it done in a less than 20-minute video. But there's a little bit to consider about the spirit, and I'll leave it there for today. And there'll be many more videos to come. Stay creative, stay alive. God bless. Bye bye.